everybody. Welcome to the Crohn's Fitness Food Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Gish, Crohn's warrior, IgA nephropathy warrior, and focused on food, fitness, and sharing the individual stories of IBD. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now let's get to it. Well, hi, everybody. My guest today is Lauren Cunningham, a Crohn's disease warrior who turned her health struggles into her passion, healing herself from the inside out and helping as many others along the way as she can. She's here to share her journey with Crohn's disease and how she balances her life now with IBD. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lauren, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's go ahead and jump in. And can you go ahead and start by sharing your Crohn's story and talk about how and when you were diagnosed?
Yeah, sure. So mine kind of starts back when I was in high school. So my freshman year was probably when I saw my first symptoms, but I actually didn't get diagnosed until my senior year. My freshman year, I was on a family trip and we were in Chicago, and I just started having extreme stomach pain, and it was, kind of in that like right lower side, and which is also where your appendix is. And so we went to a walk-in clinic in Chicago, and they said it might be, appendicitis. So you need to get to a hospital to get it checked out. We don't want you to fly home, having appendicitis. And so went to the hospital. They did some scans and stuff, and they said, well, it's not appendicitis. They gave me fluids, and I felt better after that. And so they're like, we're just going to discharge you and, go home and rest. And so that was sort of like my first symptom. And then after that, for the next couple years, I wasn't very symptomatic, but, after I would eat, my stomach would feel kind of tight, and I was very tired. That was like the main symptom. I had a lot of not necessarily Crohn's symptoms, but more so symptoms that would go along with an autoimmune disease. But that was not really 10 years ago, probably 8 years ago. And now I think that if I was having these symptoms, that it would have been figured out a little quicker. But autoimmune diseases weren't as prevalent 8 years ago as they are now. And so I kept going to the doctor, and they were like, we think you have mono, because there was like a lot of, I got sick my senior year with, I think it was the flu or something, and I just never kicked it. And I probably did, but it was just the Crohn's disease that was acting up. And so I would have random fevers. I was tired all the time. And it was just so much fatigue, to the point where, I played high school soccer, and I couldn't play. I was so tired. And, it wasn't that I was out of shape, it was just deep fatigue. And so they typically, you would look at your iron if you have, if they think that might be an issue. And so I happen to have a rare blood condition that we knew about, but it's called thalassemia. And so I have the minor version. It's really not a big deal, but one of the symptoms is that you might be a little tired. And so everybody's like, you're just overreacting. It's just the thalassemia. And it just so happens that the way they check your thalassemia is they look at your hemoglobin. And that can also be, in a normal person, how they can see if your iron is low. And so my hemoglobin is always low because I have thalassemia. So they're like, well, your iron's not low. It's just the thalassemia. And so I went to a hematologist, and it was not a great experience. They basically said, it's in your head, you're really not that tired. And so finally, when I turned 18, and so my mom has Crohn's disease. And so you would almost think that that would be like the first thing we would think of. But she wasn't diagnosed until she was 40. And so that was only like 5 or 6 years before I was having issues. And so her symptoms were so different than mine. Her stomach just hurt one day. We went to the doctor. They did a colonoscopy. Like, our primary care doctor just randomly said, this is a disease that's kind of becoming more prevalent, and I think that's what you have. And he didn't do any tests. He just said, I think this is what you have. You need to go see a specialist. She did. She got a colonoscopy and then had surgery that day and has not had a symptom since.
Wow. So she got diagnosed immediately.
Yes.
And here you are in the background, You're
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. And that's been 15 years ago. And she is on just an oral medication and has never had another symptom. And so
Wow.
our symptoms were just very different and it hit at such different times in our lives. And plus, the only symptom I had really of Crohn's disease was just that my stomach hurt. And
Hmm.
so, we just thought, well, I mean, we had no idea what it was. And finally, the pain got pretty bad. I mean, my senior year, so I did go to a GI doctor, had a colonoscopy, and was diagnosed right away. And so then they did a deeper study of my iron, and they're like, your iron is extremely low. Like, this is why you've been so tired, and so fatigued.
Don't you kind of have like feel vindicated at that point when it's like, finally, like I've been
Yes,
saying all this time?
absolutely. I was like, I want that fax to my hematologist. But anyways, yeah. So that's when I was diagnosed. That was like April of 2015. So right before I
Mm.
graduated high school. And right away, my GI doctor said, you might want to go on one of these new medications, the biologics, which
Mhm.
that was like when Humira was kind of gaining traction and Remicade had been around for a long time. But he suggested Humira. And, hindsight, you should probably listen to your doctor. But my family is
Good
like, well,
advice. No.
yeah, exactly.
But just to interject real quick, sometimes it's frustrating when you go through like years of not being diagnosed and you keep saying that you have all these symptoms and internally, something's wrong. And yet the doctors, like their hands are tied because a certain blood test didn't do this or that. And so when finally the result does come in and they can prescribe or do something, then it's kind of, we're almost jaded at that point. Like, well, I don't need your medication now. I've been
For
struggling
sure.
for 5 years. So
Yeah. And I
listen to your
think,
doctor, but sometimes it's frustrating.
yes. And I think that like we didn't realize really the severity of it at the time
Hmm.
because I had gone undiagnosed for 3 years. And, at that point it was moderate to severe is what my doctor said that,
Yeah.
when he went in and saw it through the colonoscopy. So, we just kind of thought, well, my mom's on an oral medication, so maybe that would work for me. And so we decided to try that instead of go on a biologic.
Hmm.
And just since I was 18 years old, and it like the thought of possibly being on a biologic for the rest of your life is kind of, daunting. And so we just all decided that that was probably the best route. And honestly, my doctor was totally fine with it. He was like, well, I think you should do the biologic, but this will probably help as well. So that whole summer, I went on this oral steroid and then also an oral medication. And so it was probably 3 months later, I started just having severe pain and happened to be on another family trip, this time to Washington, D.C. And there's a lot of like walking involved with seeing all the
Yeah.
monuments. And I was just like, I couldn't do it. I was literally hunched over. I
A lot
mean,
of
and it,
physical stress.
yes. And like the pain kind of at some point, and I'm not sure exactly when, but it stopped being just right after I would eat and started just being constant.
Hmm.
And so it was just like, I kind of described it as like a spasm sort of pain. So it would just like tighten up really, really tight and then it would release. But those spasms kind of got closer together. And so I just I just laid up in the hotel room while my family went around DC. And so I got back from that trip and I was tapering off of the steroid,
Hmm.
and it wasn't prednisone. It was actually one that was just targeted to my gut. And
Really? What is it? Is it a newer one or is it,
I
do
think
you remember?
it's called budesonide or something
Huh.
that sounds like that. I'm not
Yeah.
really sure how to say it, but
Rhymes
um,
with.
yes, exactly. But yeah, it just targets your gut. And so typically you're on like a lower, with prednisone, you can be on like 50 milligrams, but like this one, it's more of like, you're either on 3 or 6 or 9 milligrams. It's like a lower dose, but, and you also don't have the bad side effects that come along with prednisone. So it's a lot easier on your system. But, so I was tapering off of that because you don't want to be on it for like an extended amount of time. And one day the pain was just literally, it was so bad. And I ended up throwing up. And so we called, and of course it was a weekend. And so we call the like hotline through my GI doctor, and they're like, yeah, that sounds like your intestines are swelled shut. And so they're like, you probably should come
Wow.
into the doctor or into the hospital. And so it's kind of, I mean, just a godsend that my GI doctor actually went to college with my dad.
Oh,
And they
wow.
were in the same fraternity. And so we didn't actually even know that. I mean, they hadn't talked in years. But when my mom was diagnosed, our primary care doctor just so happened, he's like, I refer people to this doctor. And my dad's like, I went to school with him. And so that's who I go to as well. And so we called, we had his cell phone number, which was great for us,
Wow.
terrible for him. But
Yeah.
so we called him, and he was the one, he's like, yeah, you need to come to the hospital, just get it checked out. And sure enough, my intestines were swollen shut, and just with the inflammation and everything. And so they had to put in an NG tube. And so it like goes in your nose, down your throat, and
How
into
did
your
that
stomach.
feel? Was it terrible?
Honestly, the worst part of it all. It was just kind of one of those things that, I didn't know. And my sister is a nurse practitioner. And I remember saying, they think that my intestines are swollen shut. And she's not really one to sugarcoat things. And she's like, well, you're going to hate the NG tube. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And so, anyways, I get to the ER and they insert it. And it was this nurse. I mean, I still remember his name. His name was Benny. And he was like, I'm so sorry. And they figured out very quickly that I needed the pediatric one because like the normal adult size one was just like too big. And so they put it in, and it literally goes up your nose, which is not a great feeling. And then you have to swallow it, or else it will go like you'll start coughing it back up, like if it goes down the wrong like way. And so once it's in, it's bearable, I mean, it feels like you have something stuck up your nose, but it's kind of one of those things where, it sucks out the bile and everything. And if you don't have it and your intestines are swollen shut, like you would just be vomiting. So it's like you kind of have to have it. Like there's no way you can't not have it. But when you do have it, you can't eat. So, I was on like a clear liquid diet. And so I was in the hospital for like, I think 4 or 5 nights, and they got things calmed down and things were passing through. The intestines were not as inflamed. They just kept saying, we need IV fluids and bowel rest. That's what you need. So I left the hospital, but this time on prednisone, and a pretty high dosage, like 60 milligrams of prednisone. And I was supposed to start college like a week later. And so, my family was like, if you don't want to start, like, you're fine. And so I like to say I'm a recovering type A personality. And I was like, oh, I have to start.
That's so common with IBD patients. Like we all seem to be very type A and
yes. And so I'm like, I have to start. I mean, I'm already enrolled. And so luckily my college was just 30 minutes from my house. And so I did live on campus, but I was able to come home whenever I needed to. And so this whole time, like once I got diagnosed in April, I was waiting to see a specialist at Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville, and I could not get in until the end of October. So it was like a 6-month waiting period. And so she is an IBD specialist, and she, like, all she sees all day are Crohn's and colitis. Whereas, with a GI doctor, you see everything. And so, luckily, since I was technically a new patient, like my records had already been sent over, my doctor was able to communicate with her. And so they decided then, after my first bowel blockage, that I needed to start Remicade right away. And so I started Remicade, started college, started prednisone. And then 6 weeks later, I was tapering, off. I think I was going from like 60 to 50 to 40 to 30, and I was tapering off prednisone, and it happened again, the bowel blockage. So I go back to the hospital, same routine, NG tube, same nurse, Benny, had to do it again. And so it was really just the exact same. It happened on a Saturday again, stayed until like that Thursday, and then was released, and went back to school, but just realized that, there were only a few things that I could eat at that point. So like mashed potatoes, rice, that was pretty much it. And so my mom would make these like rice bowls for me, where she had little bitty Tupperware bowls. And so on Sunday, she would make a bunch of rice, did it with me. And it was funny. I'd tell my roommate, she was great. And I was like, not many people would be okay with a fridge full of rice. But anyways, that's just that was all I could eat. And so I still felt terrible, through that time. I mean, my stomach would hurt all the time. I was really tired. But at least from like September until December, I didn't have like a major like hospital thing,
Yeah.
So I got to see the specialist, and she just kind of said, at this point, we're just going to kind of go with it and see what happens. But surgery is always an option, just because it's kind of like a do-over is what she called it, And so I knew that in the back of my mind, but kind of just thought, well, it's going to get better. It'll be fine. I'm feeling decent. And so, started the second semester of my freshman year in January. And about 3 days in, I just had, and it wasn't even that spasm pain. It was just like, it wasn't even localized. It just felt like my whole body hurt. And so I called my mom and like, you've got to come get me. I can't even like get up. And
Yeah.
so she drove down and got me and took me to the hospital. And so that was kind of the start of this crazy, like next 6 months of, so I was in the hospital in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is in East Tennessee. And so my specialist is in Middle Tennessee in Nashville at Vanderbilt. And so right away, we kind of knew that I needed to be over there. And so we were just waiting for a bed to open up. And I ended up having to wait like, I think probably 3 nights maybe. And finally they got a bed available and sent me over there by ambulance. And so I got to Vanderbilt, which was great because I was with my specialist, and she was like, we're pumping you with, IV antibiotics, IV steroids.
Oh my gosh.
And pain medicine. And, at that point I was on morphine. And so, and it really wasn't even touching the pain. And so, which sounds crazy, but I've talked to so many people with IBD and they're like, no, we get it. Like
Nothing
the pain
helps
is
it. Yeah.
excruciating. And so, the plan was to kind of pump me full of medicine and then send me home with a lot of medicine too. And hopefully that would like calm the area down so they didn't have to take as much. It was really just, which I'm lucky because, Crohn's can affect every area. And mine is very localized. So it was about a foot of my intestine, like 12 inches, that it was the affected area. And so they were like, surgery is definitely an option for you since it's just that one area, but we still want to take as little as we can. And
was it affecting the small intestine or the large intestine?
The ileocecal valve area. So like the connector between the two.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, the day before we were supposed to leave, the hospital to go home and kind of just like rest and just kind of reevaluate things and come back a couple months later for surgery, the pain started again. And it was just terrible. And it's so funny because like looking back, that I was supposed to be on a low residue diet and the hospital gave me like broccoli uncooked. And so I'm like, well, I either starve or eat the broccoli. So I ate the broccoli and then I end up having like excruciating pain. And so the next day my doctor said, listen, you're not leaving. You're going to have surgery and we're going to plan it for as soon as we can. And so they also prescribed Dilaudid pain medicine, which is, like it's 10 times stronger than morphine. And it did help, but it just literally knocked you out. I mean, I don't even remember those 4 days. And so, but also my doctor said, since you've been on steroids for so long, your body will not heal without them. And so, she's like, we have to give you a temporary ostomy bag. And so at that point, I really didn't care just because I'm like, I was dying basically, and I didn't really realize that. I don't think I realized it was as bad as it was until people later were like, we thought you were going to die. And, so anyways, I was like, that's fine. It was supposed to be for like 2 or 3 months, the ostomy bag, just while like that surgery site healed and then I would get it reversed. And so, I ended up having surgery, recovered okay, decently well. But that whole period of me being in the hospital in January was about 2.5 weeks before surgery and then like a week after surgery. And so, through that first 2.5 week time, I was pretty much on clear liquids except for that random day they gave me broccoli. But, so that was, I guess, just to see how I tolerated food before they sent me home, which I'm glad because I didn't tolerate it. But, so I was on clear liquids the whole time. And I also just happened to have a bed that the scale didn't work.
Oh no.
Yeah. And my sister actually worked at Vanderbilt, and not at the time, but
Mhm.
she was a nurse before she was a nurse practitioner at Vanderbilt. And she said, we would get severely reprimanded if we didn't weigh a patient. She's like, so I don't know how you went 2.5 weeks without being weighed.
Wow.
And so I'm 5'10", and I ended up getting under 100 pounds.
Wow.
And I mean, my mom, who was like stayed every night in the hospital with me, like she said, I mean, I can see your spine, like
Yeah.
literally, like all of your ribs and everything. So we knew I'd lost a lot of weight. And, they're like, oh, just drink and Ensure, and I'm like, what? That's not. And so, anyways, I got in the hospital when I was recovering from surgery. They let me eat, and I was eating fine. I come home. 2 days later, I have like extreme nausea. And so I'm just like starting to throw up, which is terrible if you've just had surgery, and like in pain and like throwing up. And so we called the hospital, and my surgeon was like, I mean, everything went well. Like, I really don't think that this is botched surgery in any way, but you need to go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and the ER doctor said, I think you have Nutcracker syndrome. He was like, I think that this is a phenomenon. I mean, he was so excited about it. It was actually kind of disturbing, but
Something he'd never seen before and was
yeah,
like, the textbook
yeah,
has come to life.
exactly. And so,
What is Nutcracker syndrome?
so, that's the interesting thing. So, like, he said that in the ER that day, but then they admitted me because I was in such bad pain, and like my pancreas it was looking like I had pancreatitis too. And they're like, well, this just doesn't make sense. And so
Mm.
I was admitted, and I don't know if there was like a disconnect between what he saw and like what my actual doctors were seeing day to day, because after he said that, like there wasn't really any talk of that being what was wrong. And so then
Mm-hmm.
this nurse practitioner that worked in my GI doctor's group, she's like, I think I figured it out after like 3 days of me just kind of chilling in the hospital, not really not knowing like what was wrong. And she's like, I think you have SMA syndrome, which to my knowledge is the same thing as Nutcracker syndrome. It's just kind of like the slang term
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
it. But basically what happened was I had lost so much weight. And so all throughout our body, there are like fatty pads, and it were like 2 or 3 fatty pads around this, the small or the superior mesenteric artery. And they're completely gone in my case because I had lost so
Mhm.
much weight. So that artery closed in on my stomach
Oh, wow.
and was not allowing food to pass through. And so the only way to reverse the condition is to gain weight, but you can't eat.
Wow.
So it's like kind of like a conundrum. And so they did an upper scope on me just to see if that's what it was. And the doctor who did the scope said that my stomach was only open like 10%.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was crazy. And by then the pain kind of started because there was like, there was like food buildup, I guess. I
Yeah.
don't really know. And then it was also making me have pancreatitis, which is extremely painful.
Oh my gosh.
So it was like different pain, it wasn't like concentrated in my lower stomach. It was more like my upper, just like everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of hurt. And so, they were like, well, you have to gain weight. And also no doctor in the hospital had ever seen this.
Really?
One person had seen it in their residency.
Wow.
And so they don't really know how to treat it. And so a lot of doctors don't even believe in it. Like they're like,
Interesting.
oh, it's just a phenomenon that it doesn't exist. And so my doctors were just like, just go home and drink 2,000 calories a day and it should reverse.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
I go home, and
What
then
would
the
that be like?
pain,
50 Ensure shakes or something?
seriously, and they're like, well, just drink like milkshakes for every meal. And I'm
Oh,
like, that much dairy? Like that,
yeah. And
it was
sugar?
just, yeah, I know. And so I went home for about 2 days. And then that's when the pain was kind of like ramping up just because I think my body it was just done. Like
Oh,
the pancreatitis was in full swing, and they still don't really know why I had that. They think that just that the artery closing in just kind of messed with a lot of stuff in
wow.
my like upper stomach. And so anyways, I go back to the hospital because the pain was so bad and I was not gaining weight. And so they're like, well, we're going to have to figure something else out. So they end up giving me TPN, which is like, IV nutrition. And so they put a PICC line in. And so each night I got 2,000 calories through this like IV bag. And so I also, like, I had been graduated from clear liquid to full liquid diet, just with like the milkshakes and stuff. And so I continued to like eat, like cream of wheat and yogurt and things like that while I was in the hospital. And so they kept me there. They kind of have to keep you for observation because they have to check your blood sugar, because this like TPN can kind of like mess up your blood sugar.
Wow.
And so mine was fine, but they just had to like keep checking it. And so they kept me for about 2 weeks on this like TPN, and then they sent me home on TPN. So I had like an IV pole, and my food, which was actually my IV bag, would get like shipped to our house, and my mom would hook me up at night, and I would, it was basically the same thing that was happening in the hospital. It would just go into my PICC line at night. And so being in the hospital and connected to things for like almost 2 months.
Yeah.
Like you just don't get good sleep. They're coming in like every hour. And so even when I came home, I'm still attached to this line. So I'm like not really sleeping, much. And they say, do it at night. And I think my mom and I figured out that like better to do it during the day, because I wasn't doing anything anyways. I'm recovering from surgery.
Yeah.
And so we would start it at like 4 p.m. and then, it would be around like 4 a.m. and I would sleep so soundly from like 4 a.m. to like 10 a.m., because, but anyways, so yeah, I finally got to go off that after about 6 weeks at home. I gained back all of the weight and go back to the doctor, and they're like, well, try to eat something. And if you throw up, then it didn't work. But if it goes down, then you're fine. And so it was just kind of trial and error, but I ate and nothing happened. I wasn't in pain. So we're like, I guess it reversed itself.
Wow.
And so then by that point, it was like mid-March or like the end of March. And so obviously I wasn't in school that semester. I dropped out, but I, because of those setbacks, my reversal surgery kept getting pushed. And so I finally was able to get a colonoscopy done by my specialist. And she said, yes, you're good to be reversed. And so they reversed that like in July. So I ended up having it for about 6 months. And so then I started school like 2 weeks later.
Wow.
And so that was a crazy time. And then since then, that was in 2016. And so since then, there's been good months, bad months, it just kind of fluctuates. Through college, I would have little flares and, but nothing like terrible or anything. And then, probably had my worst flare my senior year. Stress is a huge trigger for me. So, as I think it is with yeah. And so, I was very stressed about like graduation, and I didn't know where I was going to get my master's at. And so that was probably the worst flare I had. I was kind of out of commission for a week. And so, but aside from that, if I can kind of control my stress, it's manageable. But I, still on Remicade. And then I graduated college, where I actually have a degree in accounting. So, I worked in public accounting for about 9 months until the pandemic hit. And, so I had already decided to enroll in nutrition school just because I'm like, there has to be something more, that I can do. Because like I listened to everything my doctors tell me to do, but there has to be something more. And so I had enrolled in nutrition school, and just so happened.
Had you talked to any of your doctors about diet? Had they given you the standard advice that seems to be, if it hurts you, don't eat it, and otherwise eat whatever you want?
Sort of, I think that so many doctors were in the camp of, oh, food doesn't have any sort of effect on an autoimmune disease. And obviously we're seeing now that that's like not true at all. Food is like one of the biggest, triggers for a lot of people. And it does matter what we eat. But I've been lucky that my GI doctor and my IBD specialist are very holistic minded. And so I just kind of lucked out with that. My IBD specialist, has always been like, you need to eat real food. But like, what does that really mean? When you're in a 15-minute appointment with your doctor, it's like, what can they really do? And so her hands are sort of tied in that. I mean, she can't sit down and say like, this is, and educate on nutrition, which I think everybody should be educated on nutrition, even if you don't have an autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
And so, my GI doctor, his wife is actually like a holistic healer. And
Oh, wow.
so
What a combination.
I know. And she used to be an or an ER nurse, and then was in like a car accident and hurt her back. And so couldn't stand for like 12 hours at a time, and decided to go back and get, a healing touch certification. So it's like an energy healer. And, I actually went to her while I was kind of like after the whole TPN thing. And so while I had my ostomy bag, I went to her. And again, I don't really know if it was all in my head, but when I would leave there, I felt good, like I felt better than when I had gotten there. And so, that was kind of the first like holistic thing that I really ever did. And I was pretty against it. There was a lot of resistance at first, just because I'm like, well, this is just woo woo. It's not going to help, but I always felt better. And so then after that, I kind of got into essential oils, and I realized that, okay, these help me. Like I know these help me. And so, that was sort of my next like holistic thing. But no, diet has not ever been a huge topic of conversation, with doctors, which is unfortunate. But I mean, I kind of understand, like in the medical system that we have now, like they have 15 minutes with their patients. And, I mean, it's kind of, their hands are tied. But I wanted to go to nutrition school. And so I had enrolled in like February of like 2020. And so just so happened my start date was March 16th, I think. And that was the day like the country shut down with COVID. And I also kind of got an email from my specialist saying like, you need to stay home. We don't know what this does to especially people with a suppressed immune system.
Because were you still on Remicade at that point?
Yeah. Yeah, I was. And so, I mean, and I tended like, whenever I would get sick, I thought things off fine, but still with COVID, we just didn't know. And so, working from home, like wasn't really an option at this accounting firm. And so I was getting my MBA at the time, and I was going to nutrition school, or I had started. And so I thought I'll just stay home, which initially I was just like, I just need, 2 weeks. We're going to flatten the curve, and then COVID will be gone.
Everything will be fine.
Yeah. And so I ended up staying home, and then it just kept, and I live in a small town. And so we didn't really even see a lot of COVID until like August of 2020. And so, I just, stayed home. And so when I started nutrition school, I really did not have any, like, I did not think it was going to be a career at all. I was like, I don't, it's just for myself. Like, I just want to kind of learn how to eat better. And the school I went to, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, is a holistic, nutrition school. So yes, we talk about food, but it's more so like the whole mind body experience, and just how everything ties in, and how everything it plays into our health. And so, I really didn't even know that before. I mean, I knew there was going to be a little bit of that, but, and so I knew when I graduated, it was a year-long program. I knew when I graduated that I would be technically like a certified holistic health coach, but I wasn't sure that like I wanted to coach anybody. I don't know. It's just kind of such a weird term. And so, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it, but I knew that I wanted to do something, because after 3 months of being in nutrition school, I had a scan, and they're like, we think you're in remission. Like, you're not, there's no active Crohn's that we can see. And so,
how did your diet and lifestyle change as you were learning throughout this program? You're learning all of this information about the body and just the holistic health and your diet and nutrition. How did that affect and change over that year of the program?
Yeah, so it changed a lot. I think people tend to overcomplicate things. And like, I just realized when I was in nutrition school that it's so simple, like just eat real foods. And, there's a lot of doctors that will tell IBD patients to stay away from fiber. And, that is somewhat true if you're in like a bad flare, that can, I
Mhm.
mean, eating broccoli like I did in the hospital,
Yeah.
it's not great for you, but that doesn't mean that you can't eat cooked broccoli,
Mhm.
like, and just trying to steer clear from foods that cause inflammation. So, I don't ever restrict foods. I don't ever tell people to restrict foods unless you have like an allergy.
Mhm.
Obviously, like if you have an allergy, if you need to be gluten free, then be gluten free. But if you don't, then unless that's not a trigger, if it's not a trigger for you, then eat it. Like, and so one of the main and kind of most empowering principles that I learned at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition was bioindividuality,
Mhm.
which basically means that everyone is unique.
Mhm.
And so what works for one person is not going to work for another person.
Yeah.
And we see that a lot with like diet culture. A diet might work great for somebody, but then like your friend might try it and she
Yeah.
might gain weight, and so, and I think there's a lot of like blaming yourself, like, oh, why didn't that work for me? But really, it just wasn't designed for your body. And so that's also true with like autoimmune diseases, like there shouldn't be a food list,
Mhm.
like that you should avoid
Yeah.
or eat because we're all so unique. And like, for me personally, I don't require a lot of meat. I
Mhm.
just don't really like meat. I'm not vegan. I'll eat meat, but it's just not like what I would put on my plate naturally. And so that's okay. But like for another patient that has IBD, they can eat meat and they like meat, and that's fine. Like you just have to really just trial and error and just see what works for yourself. And so
Mhm.
for me personally, I think just since I was home all the time, it was really the perfect storm for me because then I was home because of COVID. And so I wasn't eating out. That's a big
Mhm.
deal, not eating out, because you don't know what's in your food. I mean, you might even get chicken and rice somewhere, but you don't know what oil that chicken was cooked in. And so, not eating out for like 3 to 5 months, I think was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Um, I did not restrict sugar, but I pretty much cut it out of my diet
Mhm.
because I was like, this is the devil. Like the more I read about sugar, I'm like, this is not, it's so inflammatory for
Yeah.
everybody. I mean, there's not one person that it's not inflammatory for. And so
It's not a health food.
it's really not. And like, I didn't even realize until I just decided, like, I'm not going to eat processed sugary foods.
Mhm.
And there are so many substitutes, like coconut sugar, maple syrup, honey. Like, these things can sweeten your food. And no, it doesn't taste like processed, like you're just basically taking a spoonful of sugar and eating it, but your food is still sweet.
Mhm.
And so I really started baking a lot during that time. And so I would always have like a treat on hand at home that
Mhm.
was sweet, but not, it wasn't cooked with sugar, like real, like raw white sugar. And so I realized after like 3 months of that I don't even like sugar anymore. I don't crave sugar. I don't crave sweet foods at all anymore.
Our taste
Like I
buds kind
could,
of change.
it really does. And it's, there were a lot of lectures at the nutrition school I attended that said like, you are addicted to sugar. You don't realize you are, but you just are because it's in so many things now. And I believe it because I can watch, one of my sisters or my parents like eating a piece of cake. Like, I don't even want it,
Yeah.
and it's not that I'm restricting it. I just don't want it.
Yeah.
And so I think that was huge for me, was just like not eating a lot of sugar. And like, if I'm at a birthday party, I'm going to eat the cake, like I'm not restricting it. I'm just choosing when I'm in my home
Yeah.
to not cook with sugar, not bake with sugar. And it just changes. It really does change your life. And it changes, I really do think a lot of people are addicted to sugar and they don't realize it.
Yeah.
And then also just like adding in like fruits and vegetables, which is so simple. But I mean, we and my mom, like she cooked most meals when I was younger. And I mean, we weren't like just eating terribly when I was a kid, but like maybe we didn't always eat vegetables, And so I think just adding in vegetables, it just makes you feel better,
Mhm.
And so, and that was the main thing. Like when they told me I was in remission, I was like, I feel good. And that was like
Yeah.
the first time that I had really felt
In a long
good.
time.
Yeah. And so I had so much energy, in that time. And so I think just, changing your diet around, just little changes that
Mhm.
are sustainable can really make a huge difference.
Back to what you were saying before, now that you had this certification, the coaching, and you're thinking you're not sure what you want to do with it. What happened after that?
Yeah. So I graduated in April of 2021, and then I graduated with my MBA in May of 2021. And so that was sort of the time where I'm like, okay, well, I had gotten vaccinated, so I could kind of like, go out into the world again. And I was like, well, maybe I should, try and use this somehow, but I just didn't know how, because like taking on like one-on-one clients is just it's a lot harder than it was really portrayed that it was going to be. And so, and I just wasn't sure that that's what I wanted to do all day, every day. So I just happened to, it kind of fell into my lap, but a lady reached out to me who had a fitness app, and she's like, would you like to develop recipes for my fitness app? And I was like, okay, like I didn't know that was a thing, but sure. I had a blog that I put recipes on that were like my own, but
is that how she found you, through the blog?
So I actually had made an ebook in like March of that year. And so it was a spring meal plan, and it wasn't like a plan, but really just like, I think there was 45 seasonal recipes in it. And I thought, well, I'll just sell this. Yeah, it'll sell for sure, And then I sent it to a few people that were kind of in the wellness space on like Instagram, and she was one of the ones that replied. And so she didn't really like market the book, but she did give me another, career opportunity. And so that's how she found me. So I reached out to her, but I had found her through Instagram, and we had kind of had some contact before that. And so, anyways, she reached out and said, would you like to develop the recipes? And I'm like, sure. And so it definitely wasn't a full-time thing at first, but then I realized that this is something that a lot of fitness professionals would want to outsource. And so I, started to reach out to more people and just say, hey, this is a service that I offer. If you ever want it, let me know. And so I started to kind of like build my client base through that. And so, it's definitely been like just a great, I've been doing it not even a full year yet, but, it's been very, very fun. And a lot of other things have come through that, so right now I'm like working with another fitness app to develop a full health coaching program for that app. And so it's just kind of like given me a lot of flexibility and kind of shown me that there are so many different things you can do as a health coach that aren't just like taking on clients one-on-one.
So the ebook that you mentioned before, because I went to your website, and you have an ebook available for download for anyone that comes to your website and signs up. Is that the same ebook that you were talking about?
No, it isn't. And so that's actually a funny story. So the ebook, originally the spring meal plan, I was like, I'm going to sell this. And honestly, I had not been, posting recipes at that point very much, like I think I had started in November and this was in March. And so, looking back, I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't have bought her ebook either. Like if she doesn't, she just started,
yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that is, I still have that ebook, but I removed it from my website because I'm like, I think I can make this better, and I think I can make it more valuable. And so I had another little health crisis this year, which sparked this new ebook. But so basically, after I got the vaccine, I had some weird symptoms pop up. And I only say that after I got the vaccine because we actually have tied it to that, and which is crazy. I still totally would have gotten the vaccine. And so, to do it over again, I would have gotten it, just because it's kind of like one of those things where I'm like, well, I'm more scared of COVID than having like an extra symptom or two of Crohn's, but had some weird symptoms. So we did a colonoscopy, did an endoscopy, and there's an area that I have a lot of scar tissue and they can't see it with the scopes. And so my GI doctor said, let's do a pill cam, which is like, and so I agreed to do it. I did not know that I probably shouldn't have done it because because
of all the scarring.
Exactly. And just like, it could be inflammation, it could be scar tissue, but it got stuck.
Oh, it did.
Yeah. Oh. And so, and that was in August, especially in like the East Tennessee area, there was a huge wave of COVID. Yeah. The hospitals were completely overrun with that was the worst wave in this area that we've seen. And so of course, it's when I have a pill cam stuck,
Oh,
and they're like, you might have to have surgery. And I'm like, well, where's a bed in the hospital? Like there wasn't one. And so, luckily it ended up passing, but it was stuck for 2 weeks. And yeah,
2 weeks. What did
two
you
weeks.
do for the 2 weeks? Were you just eating liquid, like drinking liquids? And
So that's what kind of sparked this ebook. They said go like on very low residue foods, so I
mm,
could still eat, because I think the thought was like, if you eat, it might push it out, like that might be good to eat. And so I
bowels
wasn't on
moving and
liquids, right? And I never like I wasn't ever in pain, and I wasn't like I wouldn't have really even known it was stuck. It just like they could tell, because so after 12 hours, so you swallow it and it does its thing, takes pictures,
mm,
and then after 12 hours, you take the camera pack off. And at that point, it stops taking pictures. But they could tell it was stuck when it was like, and so it didn't pass. And it was in the exact area they thought it was. So I had an x-ray that proved that it was stuck. And
mhm,
they're like, well, we'll just x-ray you next week unless you're in pain. And they could already tell that it wasn't causing a blockage,
mm,
because of like the x-ray, you could have seen like a buildup kind of, but there
yeah.
wasn't one. So they're like, we're not immediately worried about this. And they even said that they've had people where it taken 6 weeks to pass. And
Wow.
so anyways, um, I ended up passing it after 2 weeks. So that was good. But I was on low residue. And I realized that when I had been on low residue in the past, I had not really eaten healthy, because a lot of healthy foods are not considered low residue because they have a lot of fiber in them. So, like vegetables and fruit are kind of off the list. Like they're just like, oh, eat bread, and eat like things like that, which, yeah, if that's like what feels good, then yes, eat bread. But like, I could tell a difference in my energy levels, by not eating, vegetables. And I don't even like, I'm not some crazy, like, vegetarian person. Like
Mm,
I'm not like that. I eat bread and I
yeah.
eat, rice and things like that. And so I'm not very strict just day to day, but I really could tell a difference when I stopped eating those foods. And so um, I decided that, they gave me a list of food on a low residue diet. And I'm like, this does nothing for me. Like, this
Mhm.
isn't recipes. Like, this isn't like things that you can cook. This is literally just a food list.
Yeah.
And so I sort of like went back in a lot of my recipe archives and just looked around for like recipes I could switch around
Mhm.
that could be low residue. And so that is sort of the story behind the ebook. I'm like, this needs to be, there needs to be people, or there needs to be recipes out there for people
Yeah.
who are on a low residue diet, because it's so hard to find just like food ideas, and you already don't feel good,
Yeah.
likely, if you're on a low residue diet. And so I kind of marketed it as like, it can be for anyone who is stressed and just needs like more of that comfort food,
Mhm.
like, maybe they don't want to eat a salad when you're stressed. You might want to eat a soup that still is
Yeah.
really healthy, but also doesn't take a long time to cook, or that you could prep ahead, or that, is so easy that your husband could make it, or whatever. And so I decided not to sell it and just to offer it for free. You can just
That's
sign up for my
awesome.
email list, and so I ended up, instead of selling 5 like I did of the spring meal plan, there's been over like 250 downloads on this one. So it's
That's
definitely
awesome.
in a lot of people's hands. And I think it really is
And thank you. Let
helpful.
me just jump in and say thank you for doing that. That's such a huge resource, especially for this community for IBD to know that there's something out there and for you to generously just post that and make it available for everyone to be able to have access to. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Just going through this, and knowing, just like, especially I have my parents have been great supporters, but I know that not everybody has that support system. And so, if you're on your own, and if this recipe ebook even makes it just a little bit easier, then that's really why I do it. So.
How did you develop this passion for creating recipes? Is this something that you discovered as you're going through this journey that you really enjoy doing the recipes, or is this something that was kind of secretly there all your life?
No, it was not there all my life. My mom is a great cook. I mean, she cooked so much when I was a kid, and to the point where I'm like, I don't even know how I would be like her. I'm like, I could, there's no way. Like, and so through college, didn't cook a thing, didn't own a pan, didn't own a pot. And so, when COVID hit and I had like come home and I was like, I need a creative outlet, first of all. And then also just seeing the benefit, I think just learning that benefit of cooking at home and, trying different things and realizing that I don't really like, this is good practice. Like, you don't have to be great at it at first, nobody is. And my mom was very, very good to just let me even just like watch her cook, or just like, I mean, she still, answers my questions and like, how long can I keep this chicken in the refrigerator? So little things like that. But yeah, it was definitely developed kind of out of necessity, I guess, but also just because I think that it has been kind of like an underlying passion. I've always like needed sort of a creative outlet, but never thought to, go to the kitchen. But yeah, I love it. It's so fun and I love creating things. And I think at the end of the day, I just love food and I've always loved food, which is unfortunate to have like a stomach related condition, but so I've just always loved food and loved eating. And so, yeah, I think just being a foodie and then just needing a creative outlet, it was just kind of born out of that.
I feel the same way that you do. I absolutely love food, but every time I go out to eat or we go somewhere, I don't eat anything. Like, I don't stray from what I know that I can tolerate well. And I know that's going to be, if I'm at a restaurant or a party and I know that's a safe food, I'll eat it. But it's like, despite that, I really do love food. I just don't get to eat whatever I want without consequence. But
yes. Yeah, that's
I could eat it.
Yeah.
Might regret it.
For sure.
So with all your experiences, this journey over the years, what are some of the tips that you would share with the listeners for dealing with some flare-ups or the fatigue that you mentioned earlier and just balancing life and stress?
Yeah. Well, when I went into remission at the beginning of, or like the middle of 2020, I'm like, this is great. I feel great. And then, I'm not in remission anymore. And so, it can come and go. And it will come and go, like, I don't think that you will be in remission for the rest of your life, and so, right now I am dealing with a lot of fatigue. So my iron levels are extremely low right now. There's actually a marker that's supposed to be like normal is above 100 and mine's at 2. So I'm like very, tired. And, but I think the most important thing is to rest if you need to, I think, and I said earlier that I'm a recovering type A personality. And I really feel that like when you give yourself the freedom to, it's okay to take a nap. It's okay not to get, something done because you do have a condition that is very serious and your body is telling you it needs the rest. And so I think just to rest when you need to is like one of the most important things.
And I think that's hard for us to do sometimes because we're type A, we feel obligated. And ironically, just the whole past week has just been go, 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 which is a lot for me because I'm battling fatigue pretty much every day. So by the time yesterday came around, I was just zonked. I'm still trying to do work and I accidentally broke our website for about 20 minutes, which put me in panic mode. Everything is fine. It all went well, but it's like, I need to, even now I still find myself saying like, I just need to rest, put it down, lay in bed. Like I really need it. And I think it's important to hear it and continue to hear it, that we have to listen to our bodies. We know when we're not at our best. We know when we're not at our optimal level. We know when we need to rest and we need to just do that. So
yeah, absolutely. I think
appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know it's hard. Sometimes I'm like, I have to take my own advice because I don't love, if I lay down and take a nap during the middle of the day, I'm out for 2.5 hours, like there's no such thing as a cat nap when you're this fatigued, but yeah, I think just taking care of your body and just like not overcommitting, and like just kind of evaluate, write down all of the things that have to get done and don't do the things that don't have to get done, like don't be an overachiever.
Just do the minimum. No.
Yeah,
Do what's
exactly.
necessary for the moment.
Yes, for sure.
So do you still balance, are you still on Remicade? Do you still balance medication and food? Is that the plan that's going on right now?
Yeah, I think that's my kind of sweet spot is, knowing that modern medicine is a gift and knowing that it's, it is there to help. There are definitely side effects that I don't love, but I would love to be, completely medicine free, but I think right now it is the best option. So yeah, just balancing medicine and also trying to, do my part and stay low stress, take care of my body and, eat the right foods to kind of fuel it.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So tell me, what compelled you to really start sharing your own IBD story and become an advocate for those with Crohn's and colitis?
I think when I was diagnosed, which I was a senior in high school, and right after that, like a year later, there were 3 kids in our community. We live in kind of like a smaller town. And
Mm-hmm.
so there were 3 kids that were around my younger sister's age that were diagnosed with it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel terrible that, because they were 6 years younger than me. They were in like middle school when that happened, when they were diagnosed. And so I'm like, I feel just so, not, I mean, I didn't like pity them, but I just felt bad that they were going through that. And so I think just like making myself a resource to them was sort of, how I helped out in that, situation. And it also, sort of made things start to make sense for me a little bit. It was a way to kind of see that maybe the things that, had happened could actually help another person. And so oddly enough, I've been pretty open about sharing my story. If it can help somebody, I don't mind to, share it. But one of my college roommates just got diagnosed with Crohn's, which is
Wow.
kind of crazy. Yeah. And so she reached out to me. I didn't know, I don't really keep in touch with her on a day-to-day basis. So I didn't know, but we've been in contact quite a bit recently because she's like, I don't know, this is also new to me. And so, if I can, tell them a good doctor to see or like a food that's worked for me, then like, I think that's, kind of makes it all worth it.
It does. And even just having that shared experience, I found for myself over the years, it can feel very isolating because it's not a disease that you necessarily want to talk about, and so it can make us feel very isolated, and to find someone that you can talk to and to know that there are people in your community or there's a resource that you can go to. It really does make a difference, even though our journeys are not exactly the same. Just knowing that we have this similar journey of what we're battling and dealing with can make such a difference. So I really appreciate the fact that you are sharing your story and that you've been doing so willingly. And so thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I think that it's great, people like you who have podcasts and platforms that they can, use to share more people's stories. I think that's just so helpful. I found it's called the Wellness Hub. I don't know. Have you ever heard of it? Okay. So they share, and it's kind of like an autoimmune community, but one of the girls has Crohn's disease and, they'll post things and I'm like, that is happening to me right now, and so you do feel less alone when you see
Yeah.
those things.
So tell me, if people want to learn more about you, any of the services that you offer, and definitely where to download that ebook that we were talking about earlier, why don't you go ahead and tell people where they can find you online?
Yeah, sure. So I do most of my, I'm not really on social media that much, but when I am, it's Instagram. And so my username is Laur, LAUR_Cunningham. And so also my website is laurencunningham.co. And there's just a tab for recipes. There's a tab for the ebook, and you can just put your email in and it will come straight to your email.
Perfect. Thank you so much for offering that. So is there anything that I didn't ask you today or anything that's popping into your mind that you want to share with the community before we end this afternoon?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much covered it all.
Well, good. We've been thorough.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed getting to know you better and hearing about your story. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Crohn's Fitness Food Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have an IBD story, either as a patient or a family member, that you'd like to share as a guest on this podcast, or if you have a topic you'd like to hear about, send me an email at crohnsfitnessfood@gmail.com. And if you'd like to learn more about me and my Crohn's journey, follow me on Instagram using @crohnsfitnessfood or visit my blog, crohnsfitnessfood.com. And finally, remember, be strong, be grateful, and keep going, my fellow warriors.